Hi, I want to talk about the greatest job title I think any man can ever have. Father. The man who was a role model for me when I was an impressionable kid. My dad. Now, Father's Day is this weekend. Welcome to a Constantly Racing Minds Father's Day edition. Now, my dad, when he got going on a hobby that he was passionate about, he would go all in. Now, as a young kid, my dad would try to get me involved with his hobbies. He'd make me help him, with things around, but he also taught me a lot. As I got into first and second grades, he would build model rockets, but sometimes it was too cold to go out and launch them. What did he do? Well, he launched them in the basement, of course. Now, we had to take cover, my brother and I, underneath the ping pong table. We would emerge into a smoke-filled room to see my dad holding the broken rocket, a strange look on his face. Happy that the rocket worked, sad that it was broke. Now, when I was still in elementary school, my dad went to Radio Shack and got me electronic learning kits. He helped me build a quartz crystal radio and a metal detector. Later, my dad got into photography. He would take black and white photos of American Indians that he found in books. Then, from him, I learned how to take photos and to develop them. I learned all about photography. But I also watched with pride in his eyes as he sepia-toned them and then mounted them on mat board and placed them on the wall, where they stayed for some time, until some robbers came in, took our jewelry, took our food, and our camping gear. And worst of all, they threw eggs on those wonderful photos. Now, on Saturday mornings, early, my dad would get me and my brother up so that we could go thrift shops and antique hunting, and later on to the park. Now, I didn't mind it much because I could go look through used books and the National Geographics, stuff like that. Now, on those Saturdays, around mid-morning, my dad would take my brother and I to different parks around town so we could get some outdoor time. Now, sometimes we launched rockets or just ran around the park. At one of our favorite parks, there was a small hill with plenty of trees and bushes. We would get into our heads that we were going to make a fort on that hill off the path. Unfortunately for us, and especially for my dad and my brother, we decided that the brush would make very good cover. However, it turns out that the brush we used was poison ivy. Now, my dad's face swelled up, my brother's arm and legs did the same, and I got off with a small rash. Now, some weekends we just hung around the house watching westerns or war pictures. And I do a lot of reading, and I read a lot of biographies back then. I read about great generals from all wars and from all sides. I read about the soldiers in the infantry and of World War I and World War II flying aces. Now, one general stood out to me. At that time, I thought he was the greatest general of all time, General Douglas MacArthur. From growing up in the Old West forts, where his father, Arthur MacArthur, a Union veteran, commanded, and a Medal of Honor winner, by the way, to serving in World War I, his warning to FDR about foreign aggression during the 1930s, to his time in the Philippines and his desire not to leave his post when the war started and he was ordered to move by the president. Like my father, I thought MacArthur was the greatest man. My dad would take photos for me like he did of the Native Americans, but for me, he would actually tint them by hand. And the older I got a better understanding about men and their flaws. But I digress. Now, sometimes dads need to push their kids. He told me when I turned 13 that I had to get a job. He said at 9 years old that his mom told him to get a job and don't come back until you do. Now, my mom said, go try and get a job. Now, my dad saw an ad in the paper one day and said, hey, get your shoes on, we're going. He took me to the news press and signed my ass up that day. I got my paper route and had it for almost 3 years. And those were the days when you rode a bike to do your route, and not like today, where everybody just drives a car. Now, some Sunday mornings, especially when it was raining, my mom would tell my dad to get up and help me. He would help me bag the papers and then help me drive the route in the rain. Now, in my teen years, as I was building more and more science fiction type of models, X-Wings and TIE Fighters, and some custom builds, he actually pretty much lit them up for me and helped me win model contests. Now, my dad helped me get into media while I was in high school. When I was already doing home films, My dad helped me get into the commercial printing business and then hooked me up with a job at the local radio station, leading to a job in a TV a few years later. Now, years later, we learned databases together in the 1980s. In the 90s, when I was back working at a radio station in a medium-sized market outside of LA, my car broke down and my dad would drive me to work and pick me up after my air shift, and that was over a couple of weeks. And that was over 20 miles each way. Now, 2 years later, when I got married, my dad picked me and my fiance up at midnight and drove me and her all the way out to the desert from our coastal town in California so that I could get married at the church of my new in-laws. He drove us all night to get there, and my mom was returning home from a trip from Texas and stopped along the way to be at my wedding. When my 2 kids were born, they were both there to greet them. Now, over the years, our relationship was sometimes rocky, but was always respectful. I don't get to see him very much anymore, but my dad and I do talk about once a week. He tells me about how my mom is doing. He talks about the gardening passion that he has been working on every day for about every hour, and his goal to provide a paradise for my mom, and so they can enjoy their golden years. He enjoys my brother and his kids. He loves my kids, but my kids have a life and we're all the way out here anyway. In 1951, when General MacArthur gave his farewell speech to Congress, he ended it with a line from a West Point barracks song. "Old soldiers never die, they just fade away." I rather believe that while our fathers now and those who have gone never really die as long as you remember them. So I want to wish Happy Father's Day to my dad and all the dads out there, both now and past. I love you, Dad. Now take care, and I'll see you guys next time.